This portion of the chapter is on organized crime. Let's move on. So when we talk about organized crime, what we're really talking about is something called transnational organized crime, or TOC. What can I tell you about TOC? Well, it's about almost a $1 trillion a year industry, $870 billion a year industry, more precise. What is a TOC? It is a self-perpetuating association of individuals who operate wholly or in part by illegal means. How do they look? Well, they can be hierarchies like the old style mafias in the United States, or they can be networks or cells. How do they make money? Money laundering, firearms trafficking, illegal gambling, extortion, counterfeit goods, cultural property smuggling, cybercrime. But in fact, a good chunk of money is made in good old-fashioned drug trafficking. So this is a submarine that is not a military submarine. It is a cartel submarine that's used to bring illegal drugs into the United States. The cartels send about $64 billion into the U.S. annually, and 95% of that which they move is done on water. So you can build a wall and think you're going to stop bringing in drugs, but until you manage to scoop out the drug smugglers from the sea, it's not likely to have any effect on the supply of drugs in the United States. Now, another form of illegal activity is human smuggling. So what is human smuggling? Well, it's the illegal importation of people into the United States to deliberately evade immigration laws. There are two sources of immigration, illegal immigration, or Latin America or the Americas, and Asia. And so throughout Latin America, people are moved, well, let's start with Asia. People who are brought from Asia, largely Chinese, are brought over by snakeheads, and it costs about $75,000. Currently, there's estimated to be 130,000 people who have been brought in by snakeheads from China. Now, that $75,000 fee is something you have to pay the snakehead to get brought in here. Typically, what happens is people don't have that much money, so they come here and work off their bill. So snakehead will bring them over and get them an apartment and a job, and they'll spend the rest of their life trying to pay off this $75,000 bill working for a smuggler. From Central America, we have estimated 1.3 million people brought in by coyotes. The coyote is a snakehead, a four-legged variety. It doesn't cost as much to be smuggled in from the Americas, about $5,000 a person, but the same plan applies. Most people don't have that kind of money, and so they get smuggled in, and they have to work it off to pay off the coyote, or something terrible will happen. All right, let's talk a little bit about human trafficking. It's different from smuggling. Trafficking usually involves explicitly sex and labor. Sex trafficking, in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age. So, two types there. You can have, if you bring people into the United States and put them in the sex trade, that's sex trafficking, or particularly if you bring in people under the age of 18, even if they're here legally, that can be considered human trafficking. We have had a case of human trafficking in Waco. There was a massage parlor over by the Target, and it's across. There used to be a Baskin Robbins there, which is now moved across Wooded Acres Drive. But there was a massage parlor, which I now think is a church, for the longest time there, and they got busted 2.5 years ago for sex trafficking. People would go in for massage, and they weren't getting massages. All right. Worldwide, almost 21 million people are the victims, have been the victims of human trafficking. Brings in about $150 billion a year for traffickers. Labor trafficking, which we've also had here in Waco, recruitment is the definition. Recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, and debt, bondage, or slavery. So here's what we had in Waco. There used to be a place called Ocean Buffet, or Vegas Buffet. I think it's now called Ocean Buffet. It's on the corner of Valley Mills and Waco Drive. And a family was arrested for smuggling in. They had a team of people from Central America who were working in their restaurant, and then they would drive them to their home at night, where they were boarding them in 5 or 6 of them per bedroom. And they were also required to serve as house servants to the people who had smuggled them into the United States. And it was raided, boarded up, but all charges were dropped. I don't know what happened to the smugglers. I think they left town. I hope they left town. But now a new buffet is opened in the same spot. And, you know, I haven't been in there, but I'm praying that there are no human trafficking issues going on there. All right. So essentially what human smuggling turns into trafficking when you have to pay off the fees. All right, so we talked about human smuggling in the previous slide. So these people pay all of this money to be brought into the country. They can't pay it off, so they're going to have to work it off. And they work it off either in sex trafficking or labor trafficking. Organized crime and homicide. In 2019, the United Nations put out a report on global homicide. And what they found is that homicide rates are highest. Well, starting off with, in the last 20 years, about 1 million people have been killed in homicides globally. The Americas are the most deadly place. About 37% of all of the world's murders occur in Brazil and Mexico, are two of the leading places where homicides in the world occur. Excuse me. Get my notes straightened out here. Who's doing this? Well, street gangs and cartels, sort of combined together, account for the large part of the murders in the Americas. The two most notorious cartels in homicide are the Sinaloa cartel and the Los Zetas. I talked about the Los Zetas in class earlier. They're the Mexican military special forces, former special forces people. They tend to control the east side of Mexico. I'll show you a map here in just a second. The Sinaloa cartel controls sort of the west side of Mexico. If you ever watched the Netflix show Narcos Mexico, it's all about the Sinaloa cartel. Here's a map of cartel influence in Mexico. So you see this red here. Let me say what? Let me go to my pen. So this red here, this is Los Zetas, with a small portion of the Gulf cartel there, but mainly Los Zetas. And then I'll go to blue, and all the way over on the west coast, this is where Sinaloa, the Sinaloa cartel tends to dominate in the Baja Peninsula, a lot of drugs there. It's all Mexico. Sinaloa is the province here, and then you've got, or the state, I guess, of Mexico. And here's where the drug cartel dominates. Now, in the United States, you can see the cities here where the drug cartels dominate, and the Zetas are here, here, here. So in Texas, a little bit up here in the Waco area, Milwaukee, and then you spattering of green in some other places. So in terms of the geographical reach, the Zetas have a shorter geographical reach than Sinaloa. Now, if we go to Sinaloa, I'll just switch to red for Sinaloa. And the Sinaloa cartel has a large influence really just about everywhere. All of these, you see up here, and you see these Las Vegas, a little bit here. Nope, sorry, I am looking at the wrong color. Let me back up. All of this up here is Sinaloa. All where you see this yellow. This is Sinaloa. Sinaloa. And here, Sinaloa. In here. So you see lots of Sinaloa. Zetas are violent. Sinaloas are violent. But Sinaloas, you see, are trying to expand their distribution all throughout the United States. They're the guys in yellow here. All right, sorry about that mistake. Now, let's talk a little bit about money laundering. It's a $1 trillion industry. So if you're in organized crime, it's illegal. So the money you make has to be washed or cleaned in some way. In other words, it has to be made legitimate. How do you make money legitimate? Well, you launder it. And there are some basic steps to laundering. What is money laundering? It's just how you take criminal money and turn it into legitimate money. And so, sorry. 3 stages of laundering. One is placement. That's where you take the funds that are and you introduce them into the financial system. Okay. The second is layering. And this is how the money is washed. And you have to wash it in a way that gets around the bank secrecy laws of that particular nation. And I'll show you what the United States has here in a second. And then the last is integration. This is how the clean drug money is now put back into the economy. So if you ever saw the show Breaking Bad, you might recall they were laundering money through a car wash. They bought a car wash and they would, just ring up sales. And they were laundering the money they made from selling crystal meth through the car wash. Well, it got to the point where there is no way that car wash would have to wash 1 million cars a day at what they were charging to get the kind of money that to cover the laundering of the money they were making off selling meth. And you might recall from the Breaking Bad, there was a storage unit. They just started stacking cash in and putting it in barrels. And this big guy went in and rolled around all the money one time. It's kind of a funny scene. But money laundering actually involves a lot of different schemes because you have to get around what's known as the Bank Secrecy Act. And what that basically does is that any crime, any deposit in the United States over $10,000 has to be reported to this group, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Actually I think it's part of the FBI. It definitely isn't part of the Treasury Department. $10,000. So if a bank gets a deposit of $11,000, they automatically have to inform Treasury that that's going on. And so how do you do that? You have to launder your money in small amounts. Easiest way to do it is something called smurfing. Let's say Johnny is a drug dealer. Johnny made $30,000 selling drugs this week. Congratulations. How is Johnny going to convert that $30,000 into money? He can carry it around with him and pay cash for everything, but that's dangerous. He could get robbed. He could lose it. So what he really wants to do is put it in the bank and make it look like legitimate money, which then would also take, the attention of the police off of him. If you're wandering around with big stacks of money, the first thing they're going to think is you're doing something illegal. So what Johnny the drug dealer is going to do is he's going to divide up his $30,000 into 5 $6,000 stacks of money. And then on 5 successive days, he's going to deposit that money in the bank. So day 1, he goes to the bank. Here's my $6,000. Have a nice day. Day 2, he does the same thing. Day 3, day 4, day 5. And at the end of the week, Johnny has $30,000 in the bank of illegal drug money. The government doesn't know anything about it because the $6,000 deposits each fall under the $10,000 threshold. An alternative to putting all the money in the same bank is to split up and make 5 or 6 different accounts at 5 or 6 different banks. That would work as well, although it's a little more of a hassle. What are some of the most important legislations in terms of fighting organized crime? One is the Patriot Act of 2001, which essentially means that it limits wire transfers to certain offshore banks with bank secrecy laws. So the Patriot Act limited bank secrecy transfers, wire transfers from the following countries. These are all countries that have bank secrecy laws. In other words, you have a Swiss bank account, it's nobody's business how much money you are depositing in there. You could deposit $1 million a day, they don't have to tell anybody. There are many more countries with bank secrecy laws, but the Patriot Act limits it to these 4 because we generally have good relations with all of these governments. The most important criminal legislation that has allowed us to fight organized crime is RICO, the Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. So RICO identifies 35 racketeering crimes. I'm going to list them all here because it's a lot, but it covers most of your major sort of mafia criminal activity. So what is racketeering? Racketeering is a pattern of illegal activity carried out as part of an enterprise that is owned or controlled by those who are engaged in illegal activity. Why is RICO so important? Well, in the old days, you could one person, one crime. So you catch Johnny the Switchblade, delivering drugs or cash for the mafia. What you got there in that situation is Johnny the Switchblade, one guy committing one crime, having illegal drugs. You can arrest him for that and hope that maybe he'll roll over on his bosses, but it's going to be a hard case to make. RICO allows you to take Johnny the Switchblade in and then start to arrest all of his associates and start to investigate his associates to see what extent Johnny the Switchblade's activities were linked to organized crime. There's a great movie, Donnie Brasco, and it is, Johnny Depp played the undercover FBI agent, and Al Pacino played a guy named Lefty Ruggiero, who was worked for one of the big New York mob families. And basically, the FBI was trying to build a RICO case against them. And, the FBI law enforcement just doesn't go out and arrest one mob guy and then say, okay, we got you under RICO. What they have to do is build a case. So in order to build a case, they typically use informants or undercover operatives. And they go in and they document all the relationships among the members of the crime family. And they'll put these big charts on the wall and said he was the head of the crime family. These 4 guys were his capos, and these 3 guys worked for this guy, whatever. RICO allows the law enforcement to go in, build a case against the whole organization, and then nab them when they catch them committing one crime, with a big net sweeping all the guys into jail, basically. And it has been by far the most effective tool the FBI and law enforcement has had against combating organized crime. Since the 1970s, organized crime arrests are up, and organized crime activity in the United States by traditional organized crime syndicates is down. All right. What has caused the rise of organized crime? A couple of things. One is that we're seeing new players now, and I'm going to have you, for an extra credit, take a look at a film on Russian organized crime. But one is globalization, because the technology of movement of goods from nation to nation have just made organized crime a lot easier, especially things like smuggling, humans trafficking. It's also harder because of the global nature of organized crime. It's forced law enforcement. In the old days, we just focused on crimes in the United States, but of course, organized crime is international now. We have to coordinate with international law enforcement agencies to stop organized crime. Some of those agencies are cooperative, some are not. The big one we work with is Interpol, which is sort of an international police force that's stationed in France. And part of their job is also to stop organized crime, global organized crime. We also have something called the Tri-Country Arrangement between the United States, UK, and Canada, where the 3 law enforcement agencies cooperate highly on information and arrest, etc., of organized crime activities. But not all international agencies are willing to cooperate on international crime. And it's also made tougher because most nations, including the United States, would actually rather spend the money on fighting terrorism than on fighting organized crime. So organized crime, while it's sexy, it makes for great movies, The Godfather and Goodfellas and Donnie Brasco and all this stuff. The United States doesn't really spend the effort to fighting organized crime that it does fighting other issues, such as terrorism, such as drug use, etc. All right, we're done for this chapter, and I have one more to go, and that's on prisons. Take care, everyone.